Engineer here today with a quick little tool that I put together about a year ago. I found that when I went to overlay some concrete, I didn't do a great job finishing that concrete. I'm not a concrete finisher by any stretch of the imagination. It was a tough situation with the remodel to try and get this 20 by 20 chunk of concrete poured. When I got it poured, the surface wasn't great, and I had some areas that really were out of level. And so I poured down some self-leveling concrete, which was really expensive, and it set up so quickly, and you can only work in such small areas that you still ended up with, it doesn't really self-level. It still has some lips to it where you're running into each other and where the edge of the concrete is poured to. So I felt like I needed to mechanically grind it down. That was going to be the only real way to solve this problem, so that when I went to lay the wood floors and the tile, that it would work relatively well. As I surveyed the situation, I felt like an angle grinder was the best way to go. I've had a lot of success with angle grinders, and they work well for me. But it was a pretty large area, and I was concerned with making it worse by grinding and not maintaining the level that I was going for. And I know that you can rent large push-behind grinders, and I did actually rent one, and a friend of mine grilled that around for a while to get the large areas that we knew were high kind of smoothed out. Again, the trouble with that tool is there's no real way to maintain level. I did strap like a 2x4 to the bottom so that you couldn't dig too far in below the wheels. That worked for a while until the straps holding it obviously wore out, and it didn't work anymore. So I knew I needed something else, and I actually developed this before we rented the big grinder. I just used that to do most of the big work. So here it is, and I call it just a concrete grinding skateboard because it rolls around, looks like a skateboard. And it seemed to work pretty well, and it's pretty simple to construct. Just out of plywood and some 2x, some casters to, at least 3. I used 4 because I was putting a lot of weight on the back. So if you put weight on the back, it slides pretty good. The front is dragging just a little bit. So key to this is getting this cup grinder pretty much flat with the wheels. Now obviously as this wears down, that it's close enough. The tolerance isn't perfect, but it works. I used some strap from like a garage door project to something I could pull tight and kind of adjust, and it took a little bit to get it to the right level and secured exactly how I wanted it, and then this board on top with some bolts to help keep it clamped together. And then I added a switch, and the real rock star, other than this cup grinder, which is just a rigid cup grinder from Home Depot, which really takes off a lot of material very quickly and leaves you with a pretty clean surface. I was really impressed. I went through 2 or 3 of those, and they're pretty expensive for a grinder part, I suppose, but they're pretty cheap for a diamond grinding cup. They're about $70. That worked like a champ. Then also this dust shroud that I picked up that has the adapter for several different sizes of shop vac. And it worked really well in keeping the dust out of the work area. It'll kill your shop vac. It'll fill up your filters very, very quickly. So handling the dust was an issue. I eventually just kind of said, forget it, I'm going to let the dust just run wild. So I just took the filter out of my shop vac and let it create a cloud of dust outside. But better outside than where I was working, and it kept the dust down surprisingly well inside of the workspace. I do have a dust separator now that I hooked to my shop vac, and I'm curious if that would work. The dust particles are just so fine when you're grinding concrete that I'm not sure they'd get trapped in the dust separator. That would be something to try now. So it was a cool tool, and it worked really well. I found the best way to maneuver it was to work it kind of radially side to side and pivot about where I was working, and then move it forward and just take off 1/8 of an inch or so at a time. And if it was thicker than that, that I needed to cut down, I'd go over it a few more times. If you worked it slow, you could take a 1/4 inch of concrete off without any kind of issue. So there you have it. I mean, my skateboard, it a little bit back-breaking, but it's not too bad of work. And it filled the need, and it filled it cheaply, and it worked well, and the floors went down relatively easily. It still wasn't perfect when I was done, and then I ended up having to spot fill in a few spots I just used thin set to fill in those gaps. But it worked well, and the floors sit relatively level, and I'm pleased with them, and I'm pleased with this tool. My only consternation now is do I take the grinder out, or do I leave it in this tool? I have since purchased a second grinder because I needed this for a while. It took a while to work through all the concrete, and so I still had things I had to cut with the grinder, so now I've got two grinders, and it's not hurting anything being in here, but I do like my corded grinder, so I got to decide whether to keep it or let it go. But thanks for joining me today and with my little concrete skateboard.